Ani Bojo, Wasnorikwe Indigenous Cause, Jagi Dodem, Vising and Donjaba, Nishnawbe Kwandao. My role with corrections is a little bit at arm's length from inmates, working directly with inmates. So my job as the Indigenous advisor is to work with the folks who work with the inmates. So I help to support staff, rehab staff, probation staff, correctional officer staff, managers, directors, help them to develop the programs and services for Indigenous inmates specifically. One of the things that we found in all of in the limited research that was out there at the time was that Indigenous inmates often either don't attend rehabilitation programs, will drop out of rehabilitation programs when it's a mainstream focus. They were finding back in the 80s and 90s that Indigenous people were more responsive to programs and services that were oriented to their culture, and in terms of attending programs and in terms of completing programs and being successful at reintegration. So we took that information that we were learning, and we incorporated that into the approach for developing programs for offenders. Well, that's the one thing government doesn't do very well is assess and evaluate Indigenous programs because they have processes and systems for mainstream, and using mainstream assessment tools, evaluation tools don't work with Indigenous programs, projects, initiatives, that sort of thing, because we have different values, different goals, different sense of what success looks like, all of that, right? So one of the ways that we do we use currently as an indicator, and have, I suppose, for the last 20 years because of the lack of an Indigenous evaluation process, we use inmate participation, in these programs. Are they participating? Are they completing the program? And then we also started having a demand for more programs. So it was like, okay, so we're on the right track here because they want more. And then we also had offenders, inmates who wanted to return to the same program again and again and again because there was nothing else available, and they wanted something, and it felt good for them. So so they would come back over and over again to the same program, which is fine because that's a part of our way anyway, right? As in Anishinaabe, we don't just hear something once and know it and learn it. We hear it many, many times, right? So that we can really understand and take something different away each time. A lot of our people that are in custody have very little understanding, very little knowledge of our history as Indigenous people in general. Very little understanding or knowledge on residential schools in particular, and how it's impacted our communities more broadly across Canada and the continent. So that's where we started. We started with educating our people in custody so that they can have an appreciation for why they find themselves in corrections, and that it's not all about them and their behavior, that there are other forces at play that have had an influence on our people over many, many generations, and have created this criminality in our communities. And so we help to educate them about that, so that they can start to understand their own behavior, their own communities, and can start to look at solutions for themselves, and as a result, solutions for their communities too, right? If we help to make one person healthy, that's going to impact in a good way on their community. So that's always the focus. That's always the goal. So with the residential school experience and our inmates, we find a lot of inmates have that in their background. They have incredible traumas, as a result of maybe parents going through residential school or grandparents or they themselves. I work with many people within the correctional system, helpers even, that have actually turned their lives around um, after having experienced residential school themselves and then having that struggle in their lives, and they've turned it around and now come back to help. So we even have, workers, NILOs, Native Inmate Liaison Officers, who I work with that are survivors themselves. NILO programming is standard around the province, but what they do might not be because their work is guided by the needs of the inmates within the facility and really depends on where that facility is, right? So in Thunder Bay, you'll have more Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree individuals, whereas in southern Ontario, you may have more Haudenosaunee, Mohawk, Oneida, Potawatomi nations, right? Cultures. So each Nilo has that creative freedom to bring what they carry, the gifts that they carry, the ceremonies, the teachings, those things. They bring that to their work. And bring that to those inmates. And so sometimes their focus will be language. Sometimes their focus will be ceremony. Sometimes their focus will be, getting status cards for their inmates because that's the highest need currently. Those sorts of things. The NILOs are the core of Indigenous programs and services. Without them, we wouldn't have Indigenous programs and services in our institutions. And they're not staff. They are contracted people from the community. They are considered to be the community coming in to the institution to provide those healing services um, rather than being a part of the oppressive system that has caused all those things, right? A NILO, it doesn't have to fear for, the employer, letting them go if they don't like the way they're doing things, or what they might say, right? It helps Indigenous people, I think, to have voice, to have strength in their voice. We have a huge level of trust that we have to consider when we're working with inmates and providing programs and services. So, we have to maintain that perspective that this individual coming to work with you on a daily basis is not an OPS person, is not a public servant. They come from the community and they're coming here for you. And so that's really important. It's a very important messaging for our inmates. The other thing, too, is we can't ever allow government to own our spirituality or control it in any way because we know what happens when they do, right? And we have enough challenge now with practicing our spirituality within correctional environments that we have to maintain that autonomy away from government. I kind of wanted to talk about decolonizing. It's been something that I've been focused on in the work that I do, and the message that I carry to all of my colleagues and all of my contacts within corrections. And is they need to start doing that decolonizing work. And what does that mean to decolonize? One of the first things I did to help them understand why this is so important, I developed a tool, a medicine wheel tool, and it's two wheels, and one of the wheels is the experience of Indigenous people on a very broad level around colonization and all of the aspects of that in that wheel and how it's impacted our communities. And then the other wheel is how do we reverse that wheel? How do we put that in reverse and change this narrative? And how do we decolonize this? And so the second wheel is around all of these aspects and what we can do about them. And so we use that in corrections now in our programming, but I also used it in a few presentations for I guess you can say culture awareness training, but I hate to say culture because it's not really our culture. It's our history, so it's more history awareness training for them. It's very impactful to see that wheel, to see all of the forces that have affected our communities and our people, and like the forces themselves, and then how they have affected us. It's very overwhelming to look at that wheel and go, "Oh my goodness, look at what we've been through. Look at what we've survived." Like for me, it was overwhelming to actually develop it and then look at it at the end. But then the wheel out of this was the most important one for me. It was like, how do we change this? How do we decolonize all of this? How do we get out of this cycle and into a new one? And so for me, that was where I really enjoyed looking at those things and going, okay, how can we, like, what do we need to do, right? Like for me, that's reconciliation, is that second wheel. It's taking all of those awful things and turning them around, putting back things in place that have been taken away, or just providing the things that are needed to develop the things that are needed. That's kind of the key, is that we don't need you to tell us what to do or how to do it. We just need you to help support us do it. I think about things like our efforts in government and achieving self-government. And it boggles my mind to think, like, this colonial system is so well at what it does and what it was meant to do, um, that even our own autonomy comes from somebody else. No, it should not. Our autonomy is our autonomy. It comes from us. So I think that we need to just take our control back, take those systems back, build them, and just take them. We don't need to ask for permission. We don't need to have government tell us, well, you need to do this and this and this first, or you need to jump through this hoop or that hoop, or you need to certify, or you need to license, or you need to whatever their system calls for. We don't need that. We have our own. We can build our own. And that's what we need to do. And until we start actually doing that, it's just, for me, it's what they're doing now is just piecemeal. It's just feeding us little bits here and there. Oh, let's indigenize this to satisfy the public, right? It's not enough to just indigenize things. We need to get back that control of our own autonomy, our own political systems, our own, like, we need to go back to our hereditary chiefs. This whole election process in chiefs and councils it's colonial. It's not ours. Let's go back to our own, at least partially, if we can. In some way, we need to get back some of those elements of our own ways. And, I know, it's a modern society, modern ways of doing things, but we can have our own modern way. And we can say what that is and when and how. No one should be telling us when we're ready, right? Approaching the end of my career with corrections, I retire in probably 18 months or so. One of the things that I'm sort of leaving behind, I guess, in corrections is the input and influence that I've been able to have on the new builds, and making sure that they provide the support that's needed to enable Indigenous programs and services within facilities, and not have to, take things out or prohibit, or force people outside to smudge, and those sorts of things. So I've been working now for a couple of years with the building teams that they've put together. It's quite huge. These are very large facilities that are being built in Northern Ontario right now, and I have a strong voice at the table for making sure that the facility is going to be able to support the sweat lodge practices, a teaching lodge, medicine gardens, and all the programmings that are going to go along with those things. Being able to smudge inside wherever an inmate might need to at any given time, whether he's in a parole hearing or whether he's in a meeting with a lawyer, and having some, difficult conversations, or whether it's an inmate who's had an interview with a GLADU worker and they've just opened up all of this, stuff for their report, and now they need to smudge, or they need to smudge during the process. So making sure that the facility itself can support at any given time the Indigenous approaches to our ways of dealing with daily life issues for anybody, right? So I've been doing numerous consultations with this team on the new build in two new builds in Thunder Bay and one in Kenora, and everyone has been so open and so willing to receive the information that I've been able to provide for them, and the understanding of why we need this, why we need that. Um, it's they've been very open-minded to it, and that's been very heartwarming, I guess, is that I'm seeing people in government that are starting to wake up, I guess, and understand, have it more clear in their minds what inclusivity means, what reconciliation means, all of that. The impact that residential school has had on people, they have that appreciation. So I'm seeing that more and more. So that's very encouraging.